this record in the 27th chapter of Acts, historically, from a historian's point of view, now I'm speaking from every historian's point of view, it is the finest record of a travel aboard ship and a shipwreck in all history. There is no more detailed record in any place in secular history at all. In other words, this 27th chapter, as reported by Luke, under the inspiration of the Father, is just a fantastic piece of work. Acts 27. And when it was determined, or as it was decided, that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus' band. There were more than one group of 100 who were the emperor's crack troops. Well, who's the Pope got? Hasn't he got those Swiss guards? Are they not his crack troops? I think so. And entering or embarking into a ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning or being about to sail by the coasts of Asia. Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica, was with us. Luke and Aristarchus. I think according to Roman law, only 2 people at any time were allowed to accompany a prisoner. I forget what the detail was on it. This city, Adramyttium, was a city in Mysia. Is that on your map? Got it? They're going north from Caesarea along the coast, the Asian coast. This Adramyttium was, as I told you, a city of Mysia, which is a province of Asia, right at the head of the Gulf of Mysia, on the west coast of it. And the next day we landed at Sidon. The Phoenicians were the great builder of ships, the first major navigational group. And Tyre and Sidon were like Minneapolis, St. Paul, like other cities, where one is always in competition with the other. Were we at Tyre and Sidon when we made that trip with all you guys? That is an interesting place. Even the ruins of the famous base, naval base there, are still visible. You know, the great pillars and stuff. This area in here blessed me very much, Tyre and Sidon. I enjoyed seeing that, the excavations and so forth. I think we came down that way from Beirut, or were we headed up toward Beirut? Lebanon, forget. This was a Phoenician port, Sidon. Julius, this is the centurion's name, courteously entreated Paul. And I assume he did this because he was given orders and was informed by, was it Festus, as to how to handle him, what to do. And he gave Paul liberty, the privilege to go to his friends to refresh himself. Well, I imagine after 2 years in the Huskow, it would be sort of nice to have the freedom to go to your friends and refresh yourself. But he could not go except he was handcuffed to a soldier. Had to take his buddy along. Sidon is about, 67, 68 miles north of Caesarea. And when we had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus, which is the lee of Cyprus, because the winds were contrary. They sailed north along the coast, the Asian coast, on the east side of Cyprus, past the northeast part of the island, and that lee of Cyprus there, that little old tongue that sticks up toward the northeast, that's why they made pretty good time until they turned west, because this lee was sheltered. It's the sheltered side from the wind, and the wind was from the northwest and west. And when we had sailed, verse 5, over or across the sea of Cilicia, or the sea which is off of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed. We came to Myra, a city of Lycia. The winds threw them further north than their route would have gone, if you look at your map. It kept driving them further north. That's why they sailed across the sea, which is off of Cilicia and Pamphylia, to Myra, which was a city of Lycia. Really, the city was about 2.5 miles inland from the coast, and it was near the mouth of the river Andricus, Andricus, which is still in existence. The Lycia province was just west of Pamphylia, the province of Pamphylia. And according to the best reckoning here, it must have taken them about 15 days to travel from Sidon around the lee of Cyprus and up to Myra. Now, if you look very carefully on your map, you can see that this ship was protected on the north by the lands of Pamphylia and so forth. But the headwinds from the west is what sent them up further north. I think I'll give you these notes I jotted down as I worked this at this time. That'll just set the whole thing here for you. Maybe I better just read verses 6 and 7, and then we go back and pick it up. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Egypt, and he put us therein. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were come over against Cnidus, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete over against Salmone, and hardly passing it came unto a place which is called the Fair Havens, nigh whereunto was the city of Lycia. Ships leaving Cnidus turned southwest and sailed under the lee of Crete, over against Salmone, which was at the east end. The city was at the east end of the island of Crete. Here they turned west and were protected from the north winds by the island of Crete, sailing along the south coast of Crete. The ships, and this was a grain ship from Egypt going to they were not steered by a helm. They had two broad oars at the back of them, off the stern. And they had only one large square sail, a massive sail, and then they carried their flags or their banners on top of that. According to the best logs we have of the early days of seafaring, they said they could go within 7 points of the wind. They couldn't sail directly, but within 7 points. And their speed was approximately 7 knots an hour. And a knot is a nautical mile. And a nautical mile is 6,085 feet. What's a land mile? Right. And that these ships, like this ship of Alexandria was sailing to Italy, these ships carried between 10 and 1,200 tons of wheat. So they were not small. Josephus has a record that on one of these ships there were 500 passengers, in addition to the grain they carried. They were carrying grain from Egypt to Italy. Cnidus, or Cnidus was at the extreme southwest corner of Asia Minor. The prevailing winds were from the northwest. That's why you can see why they went that route. Because they had only one sail. They had to do the best they could. Now from Myra to Cnidus is about 130 miles. And of course, moving that direction, and the way they were up against the coast, it took them about 2.5 to 3 weeks to make that little trip. The island of Crete was also called Candia, C-A-N-D-I-A. And Salmone was its eastern cape. Now, this centurion found this ship coming from Alexandria, and he put us therein, verse 6. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarcely were come over again since Cnidus, I guess. Scarce were come over is with difficulty, great difficulty. They sailed slowly because of the tremendous winds. The time here was somewheres toward the latter part of September, 1st of October part. Somewheres between the 22nd of September and the 5th of October. That's when this occurred, or close to that period of time. I think it's October. That's the most treacherous month for traveling. Even to this day, the same thing is true for this area. The reason they sailed slowly is they had too much wind, wrong direction. And with great difficulty, they came over against Cnidus, or came on that side of Cnidus. And because of the wind, not suffering us, not allowing us to pull in there, they sailed under Crete. And I think my center reference is Candy over there. Yours too? Told you a little while ago what it was previously called. That's why they went that direction. Over against Salmone. Verse 8. And hardly passing it. Hardly passing it means that with great difficulty. They came to the place which is called Fair Havens. Nigh whereunto was the city of Lasea. Fair Havens is on the south coast of Crete, and it's a few miles east of Cape Metalla. And as you look at your map, you'll see that it breaks north very quickly after Lycia. And Fair Havens and Lycia were only about an hour and a half or 2 hours apart. But the interesting thing to me is that in past years, the people said that there never was a city like Lycia. Fair Havens is still in existence today, I guess. But they said there was no city like Lycia. And then some archaeologist, I forget his name, from Germany, in 1856 found the ruins of the city of Lycia. What has gotten me many times through the years is people can always criticize the Bible. But then usually two things happen. When the real truth is found, which is already in the Word, which they won't believe, by the time this archaeologist have found that, then that critic who was so adamant against the Bible, he's dead. You can't get him out of the grave and beat the hell out of him. See? Because he made his statement, he hurt people, and then he died. See? And the way this archaeologist found this, he just read the Bible and believed that what was written in here was true, so went looking, and he found it. And there's a lot of this city of Lycia in the Breasted Institute in Chicago at the Divinity School. That's where I saw it, a lot of this stuff. I don't know why they always want to think that these fellows were so stupid that they wouldn't even know their town was New Knoxville. And they lived there all their life. I live 1,000 years later, and I'm smarter than they were who lived there. Gosh, a man's got to be crazy to believe that, right? They said, for instance, about those astronomers that came from the east to visit Jesus' place. How they could not have been that smart at their time to know all that astronomy stuff. Well, I'm convinced that they perhaps knew more than we know today. I am convinced that maybe the forefathers many centuries before knew more, because the Word says God wrote this stuff in the stars. He told Adam, Adam told his kids, went down the line. And there's a place in India, and I don't know where. Sure would like to find it again sometime. There is just a fantastic area where they did nothing but look at the stars, and the ruins of that place are still there. You can see, I describe it like a chute. I'm not an astronomer, but like a runway, a cement runway. It was all like cement, only it was some other stuff. And it's still sitting there with that, what do you call that, hemispherical thing that goes like that and it's still there in India. And by the way, they have iron that has stood outside for 2,500 years and it has not rusted. You tried that one lately, you way builders? That's right. The Buddhistic scriptures are written on those cylinders. They just stand in the ground, and they're iron. And you can read their scriptures on it, and they've never rusted in all those years. So, when I read things like this in the Word and know some of the things that the critics have said about it, it's always interesting to me. Then when they do find it, then they say, well, the Bible was right to begin with. Well, why didn't somebody start out with the idea like the way ministry, the Bible's right? And we have no problem with it. The Bible is accurate. Just takes men to get around to believe in it. They would not have gone this route, you know good and well, had the weather been better. But they were going very late in the season. It perhaps was the last boat out. I'm quite confident it was, because of the time of the year. Now, when much time was spent and when sailing was already dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them. The reason that phrase is in there, the fast, the Passover or whatever, that fast was already past, is because at that time of the year, it's that Feast of Purim, when that thing occurred, nobody, if it was in his right mind, sailed the Mediterranean. Only under extreme conditions would you sail it. And I've often wondered why they sailed this particular ship of Alexandria. You see, these ships, the owner was responsible to travel on his own ship. They had a sort of a law, a written law, that if the owner's ship went, the owner went with it. So if he was real wealthy and had 2 or 3 ships, he'd have to wait till he got back with one before he could take the other. They could have it loaded, he could ship right out again. Take his family along, all his kids and in-laws and outlaws. And why this owner, who was aboard this ship here, allowed this wheat ship to go through at this time, I just don't know. This doesn't make any sense to me. Sailing was already dangerous because of the time of year. So Paul admonished them. Paul spoke to them at Fair Havens here, and he said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage, this sailing, will be with hurt, with injury, and much damage, loss, not only of the lading, which is the cargo and ship, but of our lives also. How Paul, a prisoner, got permission to address these people and to say this to them, I can only venture to think in terms of the centurion and the instruction he had been given by Festus, and how this Paul was really not a criminal, and that he should have been set free. But in order to please the Jews, remember, we're going to send him to Rome. This is why I think Paul had this freedom. Like in that other verse we read where he went to refresh himself, verse 3, with the believers there. And here that he's given permission to speak. And this is revelation. This is what Paul knew by revelation. Sirs, I perceive, and that is to see. And God gave it to him by seeing it by vision. See, hear, smell, taste, touch. God showed him that this sailing, if they continued, would be with hurt and much loss, not only of the cargo, but of the lives of the people. Verse 11. But the centurion believed the master, and that's the word captain. Some people have steersman or something. I don't think that's right, because I think captain is what it really is. Believe the captain and the owner of what? The ship. Told you the owner had to ride along. So the owner and the captain influenced the centurion. He believed the captain and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. And because the harbor, the haven, verse 12, was not commodious to winter, was not ideal to winter in, the more part, in other words, the captain and the owner of the ship apparently discussed it with the rest of the crew, and the more part, the greater group of them, advised to depart thence. And the word depart is to launch forth. If by any means so that they might attain to Venus. In other words, if by any means so that they might be able to get to Venus and winter there, which was a haven of Crete, and lieth toward the southwest and northwest. The detailed descriptiveness of of Luke here, every detail is really something. I hadn't worked this for at least 2 years, and as I got into it again, I really get blessed by how accurate the word is and how just every little detail is covered. And I've wondered why God was so concerned about the details of this little old shipwreck. But as you begin to see that this now is going to carry the word by the man of God into the great city of Rome, I can see why this record here becomes so important. The adversary does everything in his power to obstruct Paul, does everything he can to deter them, to injure them, to hurt them, to destroy them. As a matter of fact, before we finish the chapter, you will see that when they finally get shipwrecked on the island of Melita or Malta, that all the people thought he was going to die. Then he lived and they all thought he was God. All this stuff. It's just beginning to build. Why did Paul not stop the storm? Have you ever asked yourself that? Jesus said, peace be still, and got so quiet they had to blow the sails. Paul, tremendous man of God, why didn't he? The only answer I know, he just didn't have any revelation. I don't know any other answer. He had revelation that the voyage be with a lot of hurt, much loss, the cargo, even their very lives. And you'll see this all develop because even the soldiers want to jump, the sailors wanted to jump ship. So every detail in here to me becomes increasingly important as I begin to see that what the adversary is really after is to destroy this man one way or the other. And of course we'll also see before we finish this chapter that when Paul does get to Rome as a prisoner, and he spends 2 years there, he writes Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians in prison. Reminds me of, oh golly, Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained. Oh, I forget the guy's name. Milton. What's... That's not the one I'm thinking about. Okay, forget it. I'll think about it sometime. He's in jail too. Then he wrote his greatest work. Can you imagine Ephesians coming out of a situation where he's handcuffed to a prisoner, dictates the word, they write it, send it out, the greatness of the revelation coming to a man in prison? Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. And that book he wrote to Onesimus, Philemon, was written out of prison in Rome. Well, that's all I've been able to work so far today. I'll work the other stuff, but not enough that I want to go any further than verse 12. So we'll hold it on that tonight, and we'll come back and pick you up on the south wind blowing softly in verse 13.